You ever drive past one of those massive, sprawling apartment complexes and just wonder, who on earth actually owns that thing? Well, I can tell you, it's almost never just one person. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the structure that makes these huge deals happen, the real estate syndication. So let's start right there with that question. You see that huge building and you think, there's no way a single person could afford that. And you know what? You're right. The answer is almost always a group of investors who've all pulled their money together. And once you understand how they do it, you start to see the whole world of real estate and honestly building wealth in a completely new light. At its absolute core, a real estate syndication is a really simple but really powerful idea. It's just a bunch of people putting their money together to buy a property that none of them could afford by themselves. That's it. It's basically teamwork for buying big league real estate. But of course, within that simple idea, there's a really clear structure. This entire operation really just comes down to two key roles. You've got the person who runs the show, and you've got the people who provide the cash to make it happen. And here's how that teamwork breaks down. On one side, you have the sponsor, or the operator. This is the person in the driver's seat. They're the one finding the deal, managing the property, and running the whole operation. Then on the other side, you have the investors. We call them limited partners. Their job is simple: provide the capital. They get to own a piece of the deal, but they get to stay completely passive. So you've got one person actively running the business and a group of people providing the fuel to make it all go. To really make this stick, let's just strip away all the big numbers and legal talk for a second. We can explain this entire thing with something we all get: a lemonade stand. Okay, imagine this. You and your friends, you want to buy this huge, fancy, top-of-the-line lemonade stand, but it's way too expensive for any one of you. So, step one. Everybody chips in some money. That's your investors. Step two, one friend who's just amazing at making lemonade and charming customers agrees to run the whole thing. That's your sponsor. And step three, at the end of the day, everyone gets a cut of the profits. That right there, in a nutshell, is a real estate syndication. All right, let's graduate from the lemonade stand and see how this actually works with a real-world, multi-million-dollar deal. We're going to walk through the actual numbers on a hypothetical apartment building. Okay, so let's put some numbers to this. Let's say our sponsor, our operator, finds a fantastic apartment complex. The purchase price? $10 million. Now, they're not going to pay all cash for that. They'll go to a bank and get a loan for $7 million. But that means they still need to come up with $3 million for the down payment and all the other closing costs. That's the money they need to raise from investors. So how do they get that $3 million? Well, for this deal, let's just say the sponsor goes out and finds 30 passive investors who all want a piece of the action. And if each one of those 30 investors puts in $100,000 each, well, you do the math. Boom, there's your $3 million. And just like that, a massive $10 million property suddenly becomes totally accessible to an individual investor. Okay, the deal is funded. So now the big question: how does everybody get paid? Well, it usually works something like this. First things first, the investors get what's called a preferred return. You can think of this as them getting paid first, right off the top. They get the first slice of the profits, usually around 6 to 8% on the money they put in. Once that's paid out, whatever profits are left over gets split between everyone. A really common split is 70% goes to the investors and 30% goes to the sponsor as the reward for finding and running the whole thing. So those are the mechanics, but it kind of begs the question, why would an investor do this instead of just, buying a small duplex on their own? And what are the risks? Let's look at both sides of the coin here. The upsides, well, they're pretty compelling. First, you get access to much bigger, often higher quality deals you could never touch on your own. Second, and this is a big one, it's passive. You are an owner, not a landlord getting calls about a clogged toilet at 2 a.m. You can also diversify your money across several of these big deals instead of putting all your eggs in one small basket. And of course, you have the potential for both regular income from the rent checks and a big payday when the property eventually sells. But, and this is a big but, it's not a free lunch. There are some serious risks involved. The biggest one? You are not in control. You are literally handing your money over and trusting the sponsor to execute their plan. Your success or your failure pretty much rests on their shoulders. Also, your money is not liquid. It's locked up, typically for years until that property is sold. And look, let's be real. Even with the best plans in the world, deals can and sometimes do fail. So you weigh those pros and cons, and it leads us to what I think is the most important part of this whole explainer. It's not just about the numbers or the structure. It's about the mindset. How should you really be thinking about this kind of investment? Here's the key shift.
When you invest in a syndication, you are not just buying a piece of a building. You are buying a piece of a business that happens to own that building. And that business has a CEO, the sponsor, who's responsible for managing tenants, making improvements, and executing a plan to make it more valuable.
And if you can accept that you're investing in a business, well, then the most critical question totally changes. It's no longer just, hey, is this a good property? It becomes, is this a good operator? Do I trust this person, this team, to run this business well? Because the property matters, for sure, but the operator matters more. Think about it like this. When you buy a share of, say, Amazon stock, you're placing your trust in this huge, massive company with all its systems and a board of directors. But in a syndication, your trust is way more focused. It's placed squarely on the sponsor, the person or the small team running the deal. It's a much more personal bet on their ability to get the job done. And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. Syndications give everyday investors a shot at deals that were once only for the big institutions, and that is incredibly powerful. But that word passive, it can be a little misleading. While the investment is passive in execution, right, you're not managing the property, it forces you to be extremely active in your decision-making upfront. Your most important job happens before you ever write a check, and that job is deciding who you're going to trust.